Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the live chat for Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We have the winter forecast that we're going to go over. We're going to go over the latest details that are impacting Hurricane Melissa and also a rainstorm and windstorm that's impacting the region tomorrow. Also, I just want to make a bit of a note here. Susan's feeling a bit under the weather, so I put her to bed. We said, look, you gotta rest, you gotta feel better because Halloween's on the way in a couple days. We gotta get ready for that. So I am kind of doing all this on my own. So it's going to take me a little bit of time to hit all the social medias. So bear with me with that. But she's gradually feeling better. But it's a good time to sleep. So we have so much stuff to go over. So we might go over 9 o'clock tonight because we have a lot of stuff. As always, I'll go over all the data, take all the questions from the premium members, and then go to the social media. We are also going to be testing out a live chat, uh, live coverage setup for tomorrow's rainstorm, looking somewhere between 12, going from 12 to maybe 4 or 12 to 6 as this storm is evolving, more as a way to test the whole apparatus with everything going on with Twitch, which I have set up over here, and Facebook and X. So what I'm trying to do is kind of build my own TV channel here, which I wouldn't be able to do without all of you. So I really do appreciate it. I want to say that and make sure I get that very clear. And also, if you have a chance, please like, share, subscribe, YouTube channel, sign up on X or follow on X or visit Twitch and sign up there, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So we have 3 different versions. Of course, you can also go to Facebook as well. This winter, also, I want to break down what to expect as far as winter storm coverage. For everyone, our public members, all you guys following along, you'll get my impact maps roughly about 48 to maybe 66 hours out. My goal this winter, much like last winter, is to try to have a limited of 3 updates. I want to nail the storm in under 3 updates, 3 impact maps. So that's usually my goal when it comes with these winter storms. Of course, you get the daily forecasts and the videos, and then you have access to the live coverage and chat during the storm. For premium members, you get all the stuff that we do in public. You get the zoomed in impact map that you know. So if you go to the premium dashboard, you can zoom in right down to your street level. That's usually out within about 5 days of the storm. Um, and then, of course, there is all of the other premium access, all the detailed analysis. But more importantly, during the storm, when we're doing the live coverage, like what we're doing right now, you guys are allowed to ask all the questions like, hey, how much snow's going to fall on I-95 because I'm plowing that road? Or my backyard. Okay. Whereas public members won't get that. You drive the coverage, right? So if you have questions about the winds, snowfall in your backyard, all that stuff, that is for you. So that's what we're going to do. Of course, premium business members, they get their own page and all that stuff that's catered to their needs. And I got tons of coffee as well. Tonight is hazelnut. Not bad. So where should we start? The winter forecast. Let's go with that first, right? And let's see, make sure we got that, this, and this. Okay, so here we start with our winter forecast. Now, premium members, we went over everything last week, so I'm not going to get into too much of the technical stuff, but I want to hit on some of the most important points. So, if you are not a premium member, sections 1 through 5 are all the premium technical overview, the El Nino, southern oscillation, sea surface temperature anomalies, and why they're really important this year, the cryosphere, the stratospheric evolution that I'm going to be looking for, and of course, we have the public section. So let's scroll all the way down Kind of get a view and go to the storm tracks. Okay, so what type of winter are we looking at here? Well, we know we got somewhat of a weak La Nina. It is very, very weak. Now, it's having a little bit of an uptick, but that's driven more by the MJO more than anything else. Let's be very clear here. This is not a well established La Nina in any way, shape, or form. We'll take a look at the data in just a few minutes, but because of that, I kind of removed that as the primary driver. It's kind of like an echo, all right? You have a lot of stratospheric influence here. And you know I've been going on about the QBO being in a negative state and why that's important. I've been talking about that since what, like July? Some of you guys, when it's just two or three of you in the live chat back in July and in June, I said, hey, the QBO is going negative. This is going to be a very important factor in the winter, depending on all the other features. And the reason why that's important is because it helps set up in a favorable environment for a weaker polar vortex and better chance for high latitude blocking and major stratospheric warming. So I am not surprised when I start to see the European guidance out towards late November starting to suggest a weak polar vortex and the potential maybe an outside shot of some major stratospheric warming. Doesn't surprise me. So we have that. We have the sea surface temperatures and the general pattern that you're going to hear about a lot in social media, and you'll probably hear a lot of excitement over it. Okay, is called a positive TNH pattern. And you're also going to hear the word polar vortex quite a bit, especially diving into Quebec, the Hudson Bay, Ontario, those locations. And what that generally means is that you're going to get a storm track where the west is going to be pretty quiet. I mean, you get a storm every so often heading up into Seattle, and you'll get a very weak low pressure system passing through Southern California. But the west is going to be very, very quiet. Probably not the best season for skiing out towards the Rockies, but you could probably make plenty of snow anyway. The storm track focus is this black line right here. Okay. This is your primary hub, right? Of most of your storm tracks. So you'll have your storm tracks coming in from the polar jet stream. Number 5 is your Alberta Clipper diving in, setting up the Arctic air masses. But your primary setup here is going to be low pressure systems reorganizing around the Texas Panhandle, around the Oklahoma Panhandle, shooting up towards the Tennessee River Valley. And the key word here, Miller B storms. Miller B storms are going to be your primary snowfall producer. At this time, I don't expect Miller A storms, which typically are the storms that come out of the Gulf and shoot up into, let's say, the coastal waters of New Jersey, and you get widespread 1 to 2 feet of snow from Washington, D.C., all the way up into Boston. I don't expect that. I will put a caveat here based on what I've been seeing since I put out this forecast. If La Nina crashes and burns, right, and just like completely shuts down, and you start to get warm water starting to show up in Nino 4, that's the far western region of the El Nino Southern Oscillation region. And again, I'll show you all that. Then I'd have to reconsider the potential here for more of a Miller A storm towards the latter parts of the winter. But most of the time, when you have a negative NAO pattern, you're going to see storm tracks move up into Tennessee River Valley, redevelop off the mid-Atlantic coast, and that is where you're going to get your winter storms. You're also going to have storm tracks when you have a positive NAO setup where you drop in through the continental divide, up through the central plains, and then heading up towards the central Great Lakes. This storm track typically is going to be your reload pattern, right? So you've had a couple of winter storms or a couple of cold days, maybe a cold week. Then the pattern kind of relaxes, and this is your reload track. This again is your Alberta Clipper. This is where you're going to look for your Arctic air masses. This is the type of track that's going to set up significant lake effect snow. That's going to be a theme this winter. And then again, between 6 and 7 here, that's just dependent on whether or not you have a what your NAO state is, what your high latitude blocking state is in the Atlantic Ocean. When it's positive, it's tracking up into the eastern Great Lakes. When it's negative, well, you know what that means. The fun and games begin. So that's what I'm overall expecting in terms of storm tracks this year. And again, if you want to read all the storm tracks I have broken down here. Now, what to expect for the winter? We are generally in two. You can read all the other zones if you're interested, but I'm sure most of you guys are interested in zone two. Zone two is where we're primarily on the cold side of an active storm track, right? So think like last year, but colder and snowier, okay? With impacts ranging from significant snow, ice, and rain, temperatures will be near to below normal and precipitation will be above normal, which frankly is something that we need around here, especially with the summer and the fall. We need a lot of precipitation events. So that certainly is looking more and more favorable. With that being said, this is how I broke down the northern mid-Atlantic. You might have noticed this part right here. Now, why did I put this here? Where zone two is where you have less, expect near normal temperatures and near to below normal snowfall. Maybe I should have broken it down into two different sections for number two, but roll with me here. A lot of section two is mostly because of precipitation events, rain mixing with snow, all that type of stuff. That's what you're primarily going to be dealing with down in Cape May. But with Miller B storms, what typically happens is that you get a significant precipitation shield, then it starts to collapse and then redevelops along the coastal plain. Okay. And typically what happens is that locations like around York and even the northern suburbs of Baltimore basically misses out on the two major precipitation shields. So the snow's coming in and then it starts to collapse, and then the snow redevelops to your east and it starts to collapse because of subsidence. So this is going to be I'm kind of trying to pinpoint that in the seasonal forecast to give you guys more of a true understanding of what is evolving here with this winter. Now again, if you get a Miller A track like I was discussing, then this gets wiped out and you just get snow all the way throughout the region or heavy precipitation throughout the region. So that's kind of my thinking with this. Now, as far as zone three, and again, since you guys see the map, we can break this down here. For zone one, that's around your immediate coast. Expect near normal temperatures, below normal snowfall. This is my expected snowfall total. I know, not a lot. This is the one region where um, you could easily go above the forecast for this year with one good storm. But I think there's just going to be a lot of wintry mix issues and stuff like that that we're going to be dealing with in zone one, which is down here, okay, down towards the Delmarva. Now, zone two is where most of our southern region is. We're talking about southern New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania. Most of the storm tracks develop over the region with impacts of multiple wintry mixed precipitation phases or limited precipitation, as the best lifting will be focused to the east, such as in southeastern Pennsylvania. Expect near normal temperatures and near to below normal snowfall, and looking at about 10 to 20 inches for the season. And this is really the first time I'm trying to really nail down the snowfall totals for the season, but giving a range. Zone three is where things can get really interesting. This is where the storm track develops in the eastern region with impacts including snow and wintry mix. This is going to be one of my regions where you have the best potential for significant snowstorms. I'm expecting near to below normal temperatures, near to above normal snowfall. Notice in this setup here, basically what I'm placing over us is the thermal gradient, which is why we have the storm track near us. To the north and west, up in zone four, and especially up towards the Great Lakes, that's where you're going to have some true Arctic air. And it's going to be very interesting this season because if we get that true Arctic air involved, you're going to be pumping up your snow ratios. Something just to consider as we move forward. In this region, we'll be in the heart of the cold air mass with storms this winter, with below normal temperatures, above normal snowfall, typically enhanced by higher snowfall rates. You're also going to have some outside influences from lake effect snow, especially if you get some strong bands. Don't be surprised if you have any friends and family up around Syracuse, Oswego, Rochester, trying to come home from college. Thanksgiving could be a bit tricky. Just putting that out there. Just make plans just in case, right? Some backup plans just in case in that respect. Again, looking at 40 to 80 inches. This is going to be a very interesting winter because you do not have a clear ENSO response here. So let's look at some of the data here that I've been looking at. And we're going to look at the cryosphere as well. And we're going to look at all sorts of stuff. And then we'll get to the tropics. Now, here is our La Nina. Nino 1 plus 2 is already positive, 0.3. Nino 3 to Nino 4, that's this region right here, ranging anywhere from minus 0.5 degrees Celsius to minus 0.6 degrees Celsius. You got a minus 0.4 out towards Nino 4, which is considered cold neutral. So really your La Nina state is right in here. Okay. Here's the thing. This is incredibly weak. But more importantly, and I mentioned this to premium members, and I'm just going to point this out. When you have this moderating, right, this means that your La Nina or any ENSO state is weakening. When you have like the positive state here, this means that you could see an El Nino, but in this case over here, it was far too weak, right? So you had like a little bit of warm neutral and then it collapsed. Well, in this case, you have just enough to touch La Nina. That was down here. Now your water temperatures, your subsurface temperatures barely support cold neutral. And so what that looks like is this is basically fading away. And more importantly, all this warm water is developing under Nino 4. And if that warm water gets up to the surface, you're going to have to keep a real careful eye on convection around the date line, which is a good sign for East Coast cyclogenesis and increases your potential for more Miller A and Miller B storms. In other words, snowstorms. So, very, very interesting data just looking at that. Now, the SOI is going through the roof lately. Why? Well, it has nothing to do with La Nina. It has everything to do with the MJO. And the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because this tells me everything I need to know about how to handle tropical forcing. This barely has any influence from La Nina, because if it had a stronger influence, the SOI would have been going through the roof already. But it didn't. It waited until the MJO finally moved into a favorable La Nina phase. So basically, and I'll make this very simple, this side's La Nina, this side's El Nino. Okay, very, very basic in terms of characteristics. When you're in this phase here, you're more likely to see tropical activity, like Michelle, right? You're more likely to see, I was trying to say Melissa, there you go. You're more likely to see more La Nina like patterns, like, oh, I don't know, southeast ridge trying to pop, or a subtropical jet stream is slightly weaker. Then when you move into phase 7, 8, 1, and 2, that's when you start to see a little bit, especially when you have a weak La Nina in the background, you start to see better interaction between the polar and subtropical jet stream, and you start to see the SOI tank. So it does not surprise me that the SOI shot up and is strongly positive, because this is probably the strongest the MJO has been in months. So it finally had a strong response. Now that it's going towards phase 5 and eventually expected to move towards phase 7 by the end of November, it's going to be a good test run to see the SOI crash and the pattern respond. This is why the end of November is looking pretty interesting around here, not for winter storms, but just for setting the stage for an active weather pattern as we move into December. There's going to be a lot of, based on what I'm seeing here, there is going to be a lot of uh, phantom model solutions. And I know for a fact that GFS is going to print out something ridiculous. Just understand that usually I don't like expecting snowfall around here until after December 15th, unless it's a really perfect scenario, because our sea surface temperatures usually throws a real monkey wrench into that idea, especially for the coastal plain. For the interior, sure, game on. We talk about the Poconos, Catskills, those locations. But just beware when you're having this signal, the model guidance, even the European, tends to throw out some pretty wild solutions. There's going to be all sorts of social media people that will be hyping it up because they want your eyes and your clicks. Don't fall for it. 'Cause I'm telling you right now, it's going to pop up. So, tropical forcing is interesting. We also have the sea surface temperature setting up here. Again, the one of the key factors here, keep an eye on this theme right here. Every time we get a winter storm, someone's going to talk about the warm blob. The warm blob is a subset of part of the uh, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, PDO. So as part of the PDO oscillation here, that's what you're generally seeing here. You could make some support that this is driven by some factors of climate change, right? And the warming of the waters. Also the fact we're no longer putting aerosols out in the atmosphere, so that's allowing for warming as well. So that's certainly a big key. And I talk about this a lot in the premium discussion in the premium section of exactly why it's a big deal. But the last time we had this was 2016 to 2018. And those were interesting winters, if you remember. So there's a reason why this is an important connection as it influences the jet stream over the Pacific. So while that's all evolving, hey, look, our stratosphere is starting to become warmer. So that's another factor here. We don't have true stratospheric warming yet. That's when like this shows up here, when it's like all red. And when it gets like blood red up here, that's major stratospheric warming. And there's our easterly QBO. There's some raw data. One of the things I'm going to be watching out for is the evolution of our polar vortex. We should see strengthening right now. And this makes all sense in the world because the polar vortex is establishing itself. But the model guidance is coming out here. Again, you want to be careful. You don't want to jump the gun, but certainly, you could certainly say that the polar vortex is being forecasted to trend towards a weaker state. Okay, strong. If you're looking for a strong polar vortex, you want to be above this red line. If you're looking for a weak polar vortex, you want to be below this red line. And as you can see, the overall statistical average is below. And yes, I do recognize there are some solutions down here that would suggest a major stratospheric warming event. I'm warning you, don't buy into that just yet. Okay? If a URL, if your ridge that's basically around Russia, it's a ridge around Russia, does develop, that would increase that potential. And there is some model guidance, including the European ensembles, that is suggesting that may develop, but we're talking about 10 to 15 days out. And that ridge can easily shift east or west. So we don't want to jump on that just yet, but it's in the cards. Okay. If that should happen, then this winter's going to start off very fast for us in December, if that should happen. But I don't have confidence enough to buy into this. I do like the idea of a weak polar vortex. And, when you have a weak polar vortex, what you start to watch out for, and what we're going to be talking about a lot as we move on through the winter, is the stretching and warping of the polar vortex. Now, 10 millibars is kind of important, but more important for me in terms of how it impacts the 500 millibar pattern is what happens at 50 millibars. And ladies and gentlemen, if I see this gain more support and I see this stretching occurring quite a bit, What will eventually happen based on all the other factors coming together, the sea surface temperatures, the fact we have a very weak La Nina, the MJO, all that stuff, if it all comes together, what you're going to see is this stretching at 50 millibars and a lobe of the polar vortex most likely splitting and dropping down towards the Hudson Bay. Now, you guys might be saying, hey, bring on the snowstorms, but be careful. Location matters. We have to watch to see where the polar vortex at 500 millibars sets up, because if it sets up more towards the northern side of the Hudson Bay, then that blunts your negative NAO pattern, and you get a storm track that basically cuts up towards the St. Lawrence River Valley. You want to drop down towards the shores of Ontario. If that sets up, then game on. And then you could go the other route too, where if this drops too far south, and let's say it heads down towards, let's say, the northern Great Lakes and the rotations around Ontario, right? Or should I say Montreal, right? That would actually suppress the pattern, drive everyone nuts because it's cold and dry, right? Because that would set up the storm track kind of basically cutting out here. So these are things that we're going to be watching for and see how this all evolves. But very interesting data all showing up. Now, one thing that we are definitely watching is our snow growth. Uh, Now, the snow advance was going off like crazy at the start of the month. It has slacked off a bit, and there is data that would support a negative snow advance statistic. Snow coverage, positive, right? That's positive. The snow depth, very, very strong. And there's a lot of cold Arctic air in Siberia right now, right? So the refrigerator's on. The snow advance would increase the potential for the disruption of the polar vortex. Okay. But I do have the snow depth, and I have another thing here, which is well below normal sea ice on the Atlantic side, which again would point towards a weaker polar vortex disrupted towards North America. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad, as Meatloaf would say. And the other thing too is that there is forecast for snow to fall in those negative regions. So perhaps we make up some time on the last day. Halloween gives us a little bit of a treat rather than a trick. But these are things that I want to bring up to you. Typically in winter forecast, you'll get everything that will support your forecast, but I also like to share the things that could create some issues and some limitations in the forecast. So that way you know and you're prepared. So that is what I'm seeing overall in our pattern. The winter forecast, the best way I would describe this winter is that it has a lot of potential. Um, Stay away from historic comparisons. I'm seeing people throw out 94, 95, 2009, 2010. There's no reason to do that. All right. What that is, that's hype. Okay. You don't want to buy that. 94, 95, if anyone lived through that, and I did, right? It literally was the perfect scenario. Literally everything fell together just right. It was like heaven for a snow lover. It was constant storms, one after the other, one feeding into the other. It was a perfect scenario. I don't think I'll ever experience it again in my life because it was just amazing. 2009, 2010, another winter that just lined up everything perfectly. The blizzard of the Boxer Day blizzard in 2010, the following winter for 2010 and 11, was a scenario that was very difficult to forecast for, but just an amazing scenario. I like to just embrace them for what they are. Miracles from a meteorological standpoint that I get to experience. I do not, and I would suggest you should not expect a similar year. Each year is different. This is why I do not use comparisons from previous years. I know a lot of people like to pull that. You can't do that with a changing atmospheric environment. Whether or not you buy into climate change or not, we're not going to have that debate. But even if you didn't, right, you have to acknowledge that each year is a completely different environment based on what you're seeing with the cryosphere, and not only that, but how they interact with each other. So I always stayed away from that idea of comparing years or using other years as a way to set up your forecast, because what you're trying to assume then is that all those environments that play together, right, are all going to interact the same way. Good luck with that. That's why I love this. That's why I love meteorology, because it's chaos, and you cannot expect chaos to work the same every time, every like other years. It just doesn't work like that. So that's where we're at with the winter forecast. I'll answer all the questions that you guys might have on that, but I want to cover a couple of other topics here. Talk about Melissa. Let's see if we got any new information here. Let's see if they do at 8 o'clock. Yeah, it's down to 90-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Thank God. It got up to 185 miles per hour. This storm was devastating for Jamaica. It's weakening now, and it's because it's falling under tremendous amount of shear. Now, let me just shift to clean for a second here. Now, what's happening is that it's falling under the shear and the jet stream here. So you can see how it's kind of fanning out right here, is falling under that influence. And the center is not able to wrap the convection around it any longer because of that shear. So basically what you have is this setup with the upper level winds. Our trough with our storms organizing. By the way, nothing going on, Melissa, is impacting our storm. There is a very faint connection in the upper levels with moisture transport tomorrow, but that does not in any way, shape, or form influence the winds or anything of that nature. So two totally separate setups here. But you can see here, here's our outflow with our upper level system, and here's our steering currents. And basically the strength of this is just ripping apart the storm. So that's why you're seeing this steady weakening despite it moving over warm waters again. It could pick up a little bit of pep moving over the Gulf Stream, but even that is it's not going to be able to overcome all of this strong upper level winds. And once it gets into Bermuda, probably is going to be about 80-mile-per-hour storm, and rapidly lifting off to the northeast. By the time we get done with Halloween, right, this will be post tropical. So that is on the way out. One thing to note though, the latent heat that this storm has released and the fact it's moving up to the northern Atlantic will help to set up some enhancement of the negative NAO pattern and set up our cool start to November. So that takes us to the storm on the way. So, see, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. It's already past 8:30. So there we go. Again, I will get to all your questions no matter how long it takes. So, first and foremost, we have our northeasterly wind setting up. This is due to the pressure gradient from a high pressure system over Quebec to a low pressure system developing in the Tennessee River Valley. Temperatures are in the 40s over the interior already, 50s along the coast. We have a few pesky showers here and there, but nothing that's too heavy. You see that very nicely here on the WeatherTap radar and surface map. Here's our coastal low pressure system. This will remain secondary. This is our primary low pressure system. This is an included front, cold front, stationary front here, warm front here. All this rain is starting to organize around the upper level low. And the developing 850 millibar jet streak that will drive moisture into the coastal plain is already starting to develop. And with that moisture transport, you're seeing showers all starting to break out around the region. These showers will continue to increase in coverage as we move on through the overnight period. But this area right here is what we're going to be watching for as it lifts northward. Now, why is that the case? Well, first we'll do the infrared satellite picture. Here's our hurricane. Pay no mind, it's going away. Notice these. See these cold cloud tops here? They're starting to expand and grow. Let's refresh this. We'll make sure we got the latest data here. There we go. Okay, so you can see the cold cloud tops expanding. Why is this important? This tells me lifting associated with this upper level low as it's consolidating is starting to strengthen. Remember, the colder the cloud top, the stronger the lifting. So everything's rising fast. While that's happening, you can see on the water vapor satellite picture, again, we'll refresh this again just to make sure we have all the data that we need. And here we have what was once 2 is starting to become 1. This upper level low was once here. It's now shifting back through the Great Lakes and starting to interact with this upper level low here. They're going to phase into one feature. And as that phase evolves, is going to enhance the northeast side of this upper level low and enhance the jet streak that's starting to develop at 850 millibars. So you can see all that starting to play out here in the water vapor. And also you could take a look at the 250 millibar winds here. And you can see, again, that interaction and phasing starting to take shape. This was once 2 separate upper level lows, and now we're starting to get one cohesive circulation setting up here. So because of that, this is going to allow this trough to go from a positive tilt to a neutral tilt and eventually a slight negative tilt by tomorrow afternoon. And so what that does is start to enhance this jet streak here that is driving maritime air into the region to intensify and basically allow for more mixing. So when we take a look at our data here, again, just want to point out, here's our 850 millibar low. This is the jet streak that we're going to be watching right here. This part of the jet streak here, that's what's going to be an issue for us on Halloween. So let's take a look at the data, how that looks, right? So here's our jet streak at 250 millibars. This is important because you see how this is kind of spread out here. You see how it's kind of fanning out, and you see this jet streak right here. This is allowing for rapid rising motion in the atmosphere. And the reason why that's important is that that rapid rising motion allows for mixing. Okay, now put that in the back of your head. And now we go to 850 millibars. And there is our jet streak lifting through. And let me zoom in on that. And again, you're talking about anywhere between 30 and let's say about 65 knots here, setting up, maybe pushing up to 70 knots at 850 millibars. Again, you're having a lot of rising motion, a lot of heavy rainfall. This allows for some mixing. And essentially, what I'm looking at here is a wall of heavy rain marching in with the enhanced wind gust. You'll have sustained winds because of the pressure gradient, 10 to 20 miles per hour. But this feature right here, as it's lifting northward, that's what's going to lead to our strong wind gusts ranging anywhere between 30 and 50 miles per hour. So it's going to be kind of like a wall lifting northward from noon tomorrow all the way up through the evening rush hour. Perfect timing, right? While all that is taking place, this is at 500 millibars. This is our lifting. Notice the negative tilt here taking shape. So again, we go from positive, that feature dives in, we go negative, and here we are, 850 millibars. Same thing. You see this little feature right here? See how it's kind of almost like a front, right? Almost like part of the occluded front right here at 850 millibars. So it's kind of, it's literally setting up on the mile guys like a wall of heavy rain and strong winds. So when we see this type of signal, the next thing we want to take a look at is whether or not we have any elevated cape. And we do have just that on tomorrow afternoon. Now, this does not mean severe weather. Why is this important to me? Well, what this tells me is that, hey, there's going to be some elevated thunderstorms within this rain shield. And that rising motion above the the let's see, the more stable atmosphere, right? So above that, right? So it's going to be elevated base. It's going to allow for mixing of the 850 millibar winds, and that mixing slams it down to the ground, right? So this tells me there is your convective mechanism, okay? As we move into the cold season, we want to keep an eye on this, not only for the enhancement of wind gusts, but also the cooling of the atmosphere. This is your signal that you will be looking for thunder snow, by the way. Okay, where we want that elevated cape showing up. So this again is a very interesting signal. And then you have the precipitable water values help supporting more than enough rain for the region. I do expect everyone to be between 1.5 and 2.5 inches of rain out of this. So it will be a beneficial rain. So the way that this looks like, I want to use the HRR, I'm not sorry, not the NAM guidance here just to show how this is going to look. Pretty impressive setup. Pretty similar to what the European is showing, even the GFS and other synoptic models. So you're going to see this wall of rain, heavy rain, marching northward with some of your embedded thunderstorms. While that is doing so, there is our jet streak lifting northward, 850 millibars, which basically sets up your wind gusts pushing into the 40, anywhere between 30 and 50 miles per hour. So tomorrow's going to be a rough day. I will have live coverage and basically doing this setup as the storm evolves. So test that out, see how that works out. But it is going to be a rough day with that heavy rainfall and just a rough evening rush hour as well as it's lifting northward. And then behind that, for Halloween, for all you trick-or-treaters out there, I just want to show you the winds setting up for Halloween as you guys are out there, your ghouls and ghosts are out there. This setup here, unfortunately, is going to lead to sustained winds at 10 to 20 miles per hour and gusts around 30, possibly even touching 40 miles per hour in a few locations. So it'll be a dry Halloween, but a windy one. So just be aware of that and just stay safe in that respect. So now that we got everything covered, I think I did a pretty good job covering everything. Now let's go and answer some questions, shall we? And we'll start with the premium discussion, as always, at premium chat room, and then we'll go to all the social media. And again, hopefully I'll be able to cover all of this. So let's dive in. Wow, and there are a lot of questions tonight. So let's see what we have here now. I hope you guys enjoyed the countdown clock. I'm trying to do different things to see if it works out well. And one of the reasons why I do the countdown clock is because there have been times where I wasn't sure whether social media was picking up the live stream. So now we have like 30 minutes or an hour to set that up and do the countdown clock and make sure everything's working. Let's see. Do you think the recent drought-like conditions will bring more flooding with the rain coming in the next 24 to 48 hours? Not stream and river flooding. Watch out for urban flooding, though. Don't be. I would not be surprised with that. Good evening, card. Is the blocking a setup that looks like it may get established in late November, early December? The kind of pattern that once established is capable of locking in and staying in place throughout much of the winter. Part of the negative QBO charm is that, yes, it could lead to prolonged locked in weather patterns and prolonged high latitude blocking. Last year, when we were talking about the positive QBO, remember I said you'll get some periods of a negative NAO, but it'll get broken down really fast because of the QBO. Well, this year it's opposite. Once a high latitude blocking regime sets in, it's really hard to break down. So if you get a negative EPO, AO, and NAO all locked in with a ridge at the right spot, you could have a period of some very impressive winter weather set up around the region. Given Enzo, is it possible that we get a La Nina-like start to the winter, but more of an El Nino-like end to the winter, especially making the second half of the winter a bit longer lasting, putting Miller A type storms on the table? It is possible. What you would want to see is you want to see positive anomalies in Nino 4, which is basically around the date line, right? If you start seeing that, then February and maybe early March may be more interesting than what I'm thinking right now. Miller B snow holes are why certain people near Penn State complain about lack of snow in that part of Pennsylvania. Yes, yeah, it is definitely a feature that we see typically. Question I forgot to ask last week. Do you anticipate icing from cold air damming being an issue this winter? Yes. Yes, I do. I can't obviously give details, but given the way that the high pressure systems have been this fall, this is something that we're definitely going to have to keep an eye on, especially along and northwest of the I-95 corridor. Not so much southeast of I-95 corridor. That's really difficult to pull off, but definitely like your northwest suburbs of Philadelphia, New York City, we're definitely going to have that discussion this winter, I think. Seeing all the data that was collected on Melissa as it evolved is a reminder that this type of data collection has been possible for a comparative short period, and that such data of storms like the 1935 Labor Day hurricane simply cannot be collected. No satellite pictures, no data probes. That's all true. Um, the data that we're able to collect on storms now is far better, right? And I don't, there are ways to kind of extrapolate, right? But you'll never be able to fill in the gaps, so to speak. I mean, AI is going to try. They're definitely going to use AI to try to fill that out. But it is a fair point. Um, what and another fair point is that hey, there's a lot of storms in the 1800s or early 1900s that may have blown up to the east of Bermuda that we had no clue about, right? And they could have been category fives as well. We don't know because we don't have the data, right? So those are fair points. But all we can do is use the data that we have. The data that we have right now is that was one pretty impressive storm and one that clearly is one for the record books. Is a combination of heavy rain and wind something which could cause trees to fall down from their roots? Yes. Um, I am concerned about tomorrow with power outages, down trees, wind damage, and very poor visibility. So you could drive, but it's going to be rough. Sounds like outdoor decorations should stay indoors even on Friday. Well, some of like for example, we did not put up the dinosaurs this year. Our inflatable dinosaurs, they're really cute too. They have like a little one has like a little pumpkin, the other one's a skeleton. But we decided not to put it out this year because I'm looking at the storms and I'm like, normally we put it out 15 days before Halloween. This year, well, we had one rainstorm, and then I had an inkling that around Halloween was going to be a bit stormy. So I'm like, let's hold off until I get a little bit better data. And I was right. Now we have this storm coming in, and with the winds, I'm not chasing a dinosaur down the street as it's floating away. So we decided not to put it up. Let's see here. Go Blue Jays beat the Dodgers. Oh, that's right. Still baseball going on, huh? Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't mind the Blue Jays winning. I'm not much of a Dodgers fan, especially lately. Let's see what we got in social media land. Well, there is a lot of activity here on YouTube, and a lot of activity picking up on Twitch as well. Let's see. I appreciate Wow, a lot of great stuff here all around. I'm not sure where to begin. Um, let's see here. Yes, I do have a Batman mug. That is very true. Last winter we had 18 inches of snow here in my part of Southeast Maryland. Do you think we could match that winter? It's going to be tough, um, especially if you're on the Delmarva. But all you need is one storm. So let's see. What will be fueling the development of lows on the main track near the Frontal Range and Southern Plains? Basically, the clash between the polar Arctic air trying to drive southward from the plains. And again, your coldest air this year is going to be in the Northern Plains and Great Lakes, which is why I'm also expecting a lot of lake effect snow up there. We are going to be on that storm track where we're going to be on the clash between that Arctic air trying to press southward and the warmer air trying to push northward. Now, typically with a positive TNH pattern, is you'll get your trough axis centered right around the Mississippi River Valley, and you get a bit of a weak ridge type signature setting up around Bermuda. I'm sorry, not Bermuda, the Bahamas and southern Florida. This is why typically I don't expect a Miller A type storm system, but instead more of a storm track towards the Tennessee River Valley and then redevelopment towards the coast um, in this type of setup. How does convection near the date line lead to storms on the U.S. East Coast? Okay, so there's a lot of great research. Definitely look up the names Cosin and Mussolini, Northeast Snowstorms. It's a book. Okay, they did a lot of research, and basically, when you have a lot of convection around the date line, that's usually support to MJO and 8 and 1, right? Now, the reason why is that convection influences the development of the subtropical and polar jet stream and where the trough axes lock in and set up. That convection and release of latent heat enhances the jet couplets and basically sets up a favorable pattern to set up a ridge around the Rockies and a trough axis roughly between the Mississippi River Valley and the Tennessee River Valley. And when you have that set up and you combine that with timing just right of a negative NAO, that locks in your winter storm. Now, your convection around the dateline does not guarantee snowfall in your backyard. What it guarantees is the potential for East Coast cyclogenesis. Now, or low pressure development. That low pressure track could be on the coastal plain, it could be over the coastal waters, it could cut up towards the Great Lakes. It doesn't tell you that, right? It just tells you there's a better potential for a storm to develop. Then you have to use all the other factors to determine the details for that East Coast storm. Let's see here. Yeah, 95, 96. Yeah. Hey, Paul, it's good to see you too. Only impact. Yeah, just swells from Melissa. That's about it. Thunderstorms are in the forecast are elevated, right? But not necessarily, not anything severe. The severe notion, the winds, is more based on the synoptic mixing than anything else. There's an interesting stat that almost all cases in New York City sees 3 inches, the there is a stat that almost all cases, if New York City sees 3 inches of snow in December, then the whole winter will be above average snowfall. If under 3 inches for December, the winter will be below average in snowfall. It's an interesting stat. Okay, so let's think about this here. If you have 3 inches or more in December, most likely that's going to be towards the end of December, you're most likely entering into an active weather pattern. And that active weather pattern will continue into into January. If that pattern continues into January, you would likely have a feedback setting up for late January and February. So it kind of makes sense because you would need a favorable pattern just to get December kickstart like that. Now, what if you're at 3 inches? What does that mean? Because this thing is under or over. So if you're at 2.9 or 3.1, does that matter at all? Interesting question, right? After a chilly first week of November, do you expect milder periods? November will have two cold phases, the start and the end of the month. We should see it relaxing towards the middle of the month. Let's see here. Hey, Steve, I wasn't here for the entire stream. Will we have a winter in northern New Jersey? Yes, you will. And thank you for the little tip. I appreciate it. You definitely will have an active weather pattern. That is for sure for northern New Jersey. You can also check out the discussion for the winter forecast. It actually details that also really well for your region. Let's see here. Steve, Dr. Cohen is not sold on a cold winter. Can you explain why that may be? Okay, so Dr. Cohen, okay, Judah Cohen, he focuses a lot on the snow advance, and rightfully so. It's excellent research that he's done. And he saw that there's a slowing, right? And I get why you'd want to focus on that. But in my perspective, in my way that I like to forecast, is that it's certainly a part of the forecast, but much like how there's some people who are far too focused on the state of El Nino or La Nina, sometimes some people can be too focused on the snowfall events in Siberia. It is a factor. It's not the only one. And typically when it comes to the seasonal forecast, I like to look at everything and then try to piece it all together. And one of the things I like to do when I'm trying to piece it all together, and we did this with great detail with the premium chat, was not only looking at the observations, but asking why did those observations occur? Because understanding the physical forcing behind it will give you a better idea of how the atmosphere is evolving. And it doesn't necessarily mean, well, A equals B and B equals C. That's not how the atmosphere works. The atmosphere works with A plus B to the cosine of J equals result, right? So you have to take all of these factors, all these moving features, and then combine them. And then the difficult part is trying to figure out how they all interact. And that's where the forecasting comes in. You could take all the model guidance in the world, but if you don't understand the physical laws behind it and the driving mechanisms behind it, it means nothing, right? It's all you might as well. You can just get a monkey just to copy and paste the European or the CFS or whatever. Um, where the skill comes in is to take all these observations, take all these factors, and try to figure out how the atmosphere is going to interact with these different features, and then go from there. But Judah is an amazing meteorologist and researcher and forecaster. Absolutely. Uh, Let's see here. Tomorrow's rain will have slight impact on the drought, but not nearly enough for what we need. How do you avoid personal bias in a forecast? Oh, this is a good one. This is actually the best one I've got. Yeah. Like when you are putting it together, when you have internal bias for wanting a snowy winter. This this is a great question. And this is something I struggled with when I was younger. So, there's two competing factors here. One, I want it to snow because I love snow. Two, I want to be right because I want to be the best. So, as you get older, two things come to realization. One, you'll never be the best because every time you think you're the best, you're going to get slapped in the face by Mother Nature. And two, yeah, it's fun to look at snow, but you don't want to shovel it and you don't want to drive in it and you got things to do. So those two fade away and that you just want to be as right as you could possibly be. And as much as you like snow, and look, I'm going to be excited about it. Um, I don't need a bad back either, right? And also, when you start getting a house, that too becomes a factor as well. Trust me about that. It changes your whole perspective because then every creak and every sound that the house makes, you start to get paranoid. So it's definitely that. Now, with that being the case, um, you have to when you're looking at the different models and you're looking at the scenario, you should be able to argue against a scenario. Now, here's what I mean by that. If you are looking at a worst case scenario. Let's say Mile Guys is putting out 20 inches of snow in your backyard. What are the arguments against it? And are they valid? That's how you start to fight against any type of bias towards cold and snow or warm and wet, right? What what would negate that argument, and is it valid? If you go about forecasting that way in terms of organizing your thought process and your plan, that will get you to limit. You'll never completely go away, but it'll get you to limit your bias and become a better forecaster. Let's see here. Flash flooding, urban flooding's a threat, not so much any river flooding. There'll still be lingering showers tomorrow evening in New York City, but later after 8 p.m., it'll start to dry out. Let's see here. Where a single storm saved the season made it average or above average. I see. All right, let's see what else we have here on X here. Okay, looks like that's all clear. Well, thank you very much. She is starting to feel better gradually. Let's see, and what do we have here? I appreciate the help that I'm being given for Twitch. I really appreciate that. Definitely going to be looking into that. That is for sure. Let's see here. Daniel Veens. I'm in North Adams, Massachusetts, way up there. On average, winter season snowfall is around 78.1. Based on your forecast, what are your thoughts for us? Oh, that's a tough one. Probably be in the 85 to 90-inch range. Um, you're definitely going to have a good potential of being above average in New England, because you're going to have much colder air to work with. And I think that you're going to have more mature storms, part of that Miller B aspect. Um, so you're definitely going to have some busy winter, a busy time up there. For Thanksgiving right now, I don't have a lot of details, but we're definitely going to be moving into a stormy period. So that is for sure. Whether that's before or after Thanksgiving, I don't know yet, but definitely a stormier, colder period of weather is likely. Excuse me. We have a number of years where stratosphere has done things contrary to snow growth theory because of other factors overwhelming the snow growth influence. Absolutely. Absolutely, that is the case. And I'll tell you one thing, if you get that ridge around Ural, uh, Russia, then things are going to get interesting real fast, whether or not we see a rebound in snow growth or not. If you want a real laugh, look at the 18Z GFS trying to pull a tropical system into the Yucatan in mid-November. Uh, Yeah, you know someone's going to be using that too. You know it. Let's see here. Do you think Hurricane Melissa could have gotten stronger? I hope not. Um, that would probably break. I can't really say yes or no. I would just say hope not. Let's see here. We got other stuff here on Facebook here. Sorry, I signed out a little longer or less. Okay, I already answered that as well. All right. So far, getting everything covered here on social media land. Not bad. No, and it's past 9 o'clock. There you go. No wonder why my voice is starting to go. So I think we covered quite a bit, and definitely some great questions here. So here is the plan for tomorrow before I sign off. I'm going to be running a test run on doing live coverage, but using this format, just streaming along. When I need to take a break, I'll put up like a little clock timer for a break, and just cover a storm event. Um, it might be a bit broken, a bit choppy, just going over some of the data, but I want to test it out before we actually get a real winter storm and let's say things get a little bit loopy. So Definitely going to be testing that out tomorrow afternoon. So if you want to drop in, ask some questions about the rainstorm, more than happy to do so. I'll be here answering questions. And if you're not here, that's fine too, because I'm going to be playing with all the little features that are part of this new system I'm working with. So it's going to be fun to see how that works out. So again, thank you as always for joining us with the live chat. I hope I answered all your questions for the upcoming winter and also this rainstorm. I think it's going to be an interesting winter. It's definitely going to be one that's going to keep me on my toes, and it's going to be challenging dealing with the tropical forcing. And with that tropical forcing, put out a little caveat here with my concerns with model guidance, and this includes AI. Okay, AI is not some sort of crystal ball; it has errors too. With that being the case, there are going to be a lot of phantom winter storms showing up in the model guidance. And the reason why is because all the model guidance is going to be struggling with two factors here this winter. One, robust polar and subtropical shortwaves, and two, poor sampling of the robust polar and subtropical shortwaves because of the reduction of sampling that we are experiencing. With that being the case, don't be surprised if you see a lot of winter storms 10 to 15 days out or showing up on day 9 and 10 and then disappearing. This is all because of the interaction of these short waves. So, as always, we're going to stick to our winter rule, which I always mention every year. 5 to 7 days out, caution flags. 3 to 5 days out, take it more seriously. 3 days and under, game on. That's how we're going to do the forecasting. I think that's the best way to handle model guidance. So that's it for tonight. Thank you as always for joining. I really appreciate it. And as always, stay safe out there.